the metrics of how you're working through this, how we're seeing change. And, we do make it objective in that nature. I think, working and understanding the psychological nature also of what happens in the brain and the body and the emotions and the theories that exist are all relevant, but that's not why anyone's going to change. Why people change is the connection you have with the individual and the belief of kind of doing the work and trusting that process. And so when people are like, oh, I don't know what you're doing, or I don't see how you're working, I'll say, okay, well, what do you want to see? Let's map that all together. Let's measure it. Let's work through it. And, if you're good, you're good. Cool, I'm still here. We'll have coffee.
Yeah, okay. The, obviously it sounds like you've had some experience with that. I have too in the past, but I was like you. I was born in the physical, on the physical side of things, and didn't go to the psychological side academically or professionally until later.
Yeah.
But I recognize the connection, and that's why the question was framed the way it was. I do think that most professionals understand what you do.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Most.
Yeah, I mean, I think in my field, in terms of psychology, I think people can understand that, right? The sports psychology, the mental skills training, that part, they had this idea of it, but I still am constantly kind of re-educating organizations of how the work looks like. What does the work look like? People might see me and be like, I don't know what she's done at all, right? Because a lot of my work is invisible. It's on the sidelines. It's very trusted in nature. Instead of the word confidential, it's trusted conversations in space. Right. And I hold that space. And so there has to be a common understanding of what the trusted confidential space looks like, how I do my work. But, in a common day, in a team setting, in organizational setting with players, it's about feel and feeling the environment. And I might be doing work by just putting my hand on someone's shoulder and just giving them a nod through a nonverbal communication. And we know that's okay. Or I observe how the feel is working on the flow of the practice, and then catch players independently in a hallway, the water cooler chats that you have, a lot of coffee chats. But that is the work, right? It's not the traditional psychotherapy in my office for 50 minutes every day. I have those clients, and that's a very different workspace. But in organizational flows with players, the work is the presence of me being there, and the presence of them, and the observation and the feel of the environment, and finding the moments of making some change or some little nuggets here and there that allow shifts to happen.
Yeah, most of your work and most of your consultation is done on the run. Mm-hmm. While you're up and down the hallway, past the weight room, on the field, on the track, whatever it is. That's that much we do understand, and I think that's where the disconnect is you can look at the athletic trainer and tell if they're doing something.
True. Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other part is am I always on? Am I ever just Hillary? Am I always having a private conversation? Finding this balance and flow of do people never want to talk to me then because they think they're always in session versus how you fit? And that's where it comes back to the feel part of it as well.
And what I think sometimes the other professionals don't know, or sometimes coaches, and don't let me give up a professional secret or a trade secret, but they're being watched too.
Oh, for sure. But they know that, right? My favorite thing, I think, what the running joke was when Ted Lasso first came out, and Dr. Sharon was introduced in season 2. If you haven't watched it, she's their sports psychologist. And there's this prime episode, it's 1 or 2 of season 2, where she sits in the far back of the stadium, and then every time that the coach looks back, she's getting closer and closer and closer to the field. And it's this analogy that the psychologist is always watching and closer and closer consuming the space. But it shed light on that's how they feel. But there's the reality to it as well of they want to know what I'm thinking, what I'm seeing. And so for me, I'm then we'll just talk about it. What do I see at practice? I'll tell you. I make it very real. So there's no assumptions or mind reading. We just have the transparent conversation. Yes, I'm observing. Here's what I look for.
Do you use a mixed approach? Is it both, quantitative and qualitative, or are you just one side or the other? I feel like you can't be. Yeah.
Yeah. But, yeah. Totally.
So talk to us about how you make a qualitative finding quantitative? How do you give that some life in someone else's eyes? You know what I mean?
Sure. I think like if we're measuring like, you know, any construct that you feel important, if you're looking at like the values
Right.
of a team, right? Like let's say you want a team that's really big in teamwork. Well, we have to operationally define what teamwork means, the behaviors of what that looks like, and then we create like a rating system for that, right? Or,
Right.
you know, so I think that's the blend of like, when I go into a team, I always work through what are their KPIs, their, you know, key performance indicators that they're
Right.
looking for from a mental and emotional standpoint, and how do we look to observe it? How do we teach it? Can we work through that? Have we common language? And then you just put it to a metric rating scale and kind of assess players on certain timelines of where they're at.
And who gets to see that?
So I believe in transparency for sure. So the players will get to see that if we're having cross raters and multiple raters, we're transparent in who the raters are. We're individually, if it's a team thing, like collectively, the algorithm will just say, here's the team view. If you want your individual snapshots, then the individual will come in and talk to me about their own viewpoint because they're rating it themselves.
Well, I asked that question is because a lot of coaches and a lot of athletes themselves and even parents, they want to know that there's still a piece of or a chunk of information that's confidential and it's being kept there.
Yes, so I would say it's twofold. If it's a global team thing, then we have the transparency of a team working through that. If it's an individual personal goal, only the individual will say that. I don't know if I cut out for a minute or not, but
no, you're good.
Yeah, so I think if I'm working individually and it's their shared trusted stuff, only me and the individual would have that information. I would never share or disclose their growth progress without their permission. But as a group with a team, we absolutely will say, hey, this is transparent. Here's the ratings. Here's what we're working through, and it's common language amongst that.
Okay, you're a private practitioner. So what I want to know is, do you have a go-to bit of technology that you use
For teaching certain skills or working through stuff?
Both, either one or the other.
Yeah, I mean, I think like I'm really big on mindfulness and meditation, and so I think utilizing apps and pulling in resources that help people in general is very useful. Whether it's Calm or Headspace or they just pull up YouTube videos for that. I think the Aura Ring is commonly talked about, or the Whoop Band for measuring their sleep and bringing in those aspects of pieces to track the metrics. Sometimes I'll use apps for tracking feeling monitoring. So like there's free apps that they can track their own emotional output and journal. I've looked into other different kind of curious if I want to bring in any neurofeedback or biofeedback metrics, but a lot of my primarily work is more traditional, like individual talk therapy, journaling, writing, reflective practice, less technology-based work.
Right. Getting buy-in from the athletes on that?
Yeah, and sometimes it's self-initiated and led from the buy-in, but a lot of the meditation, they 100% want to learn how to regulate their emotions and be calmer. And once they explain like what happens in the brain, they're easily bought in. And I'll take them through my own breathing work for them first. And I'm like, if all you learn is breath work, like you're amazing. Intentional breathing is like a game changer for you. And then we'll find out like which apps work for them, when are they going to utilize it, how they're going to be consistent. I find the majority, athletes are used to an environment where it's like, we're going to tell you what to do, where to go, how to do it, and then execute it. And so often I